Welcome back to the Miraculous Mamas podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Joy, and we believe in empowering people through storytelling and education. And I'm really excited about today's episode. I have on Dr. Dan. He is a psychologist, an author, a parenting expert, and he's the host of the Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan podcast. I was just recently a guest on there, so make sure you go check that out. And I was so honored that I was able to be a guest on his show because he brings on such amazing people. And I highly recommend listening to his podcast. If you are in the parenting season of life, it focuses on parenting, and you can scroll through and look for an episode specifically about different topics, different seasons, and it is so good. I'm so glad that I found his podcast because it's been a resource to me. I'm always taking clips and being like, sending them to Vito, being like, hey, listen to this part of this podcast. It's so good. Or this guy talks about this one thing. We got to make sure that we do that. It's just very informative. And he is just awesome at what he does. He's written so many books relating to parenting and giftedness, dealing with kids that are gifted. And I just absolutely love his work. So today's going to be a great podcast. I'm excited for you guys to listen. If you are listening, make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast so you can stay up to date with all the episodes and everything that comes out. Make sure that you leave us a review. Tell us what you're loving about the podcast and share it with your family and friends. That is the best way for us to spread the news and to make sure that people are hearing the valuable information that the guests bring on. If you didn't listen last week, we had on Wendy Powell. She is from Mutu, and she developed this system for birthing people after they have babies to basically get in touch with their bodies. It's a pelvic floor system, and it's not just after babies. That's kind of what people go to, but you start it before, and it's learning how to get in touch with your pelvic floor, your core. And there's so many things so much valuable information in that podcast, but just there's so many things that we're kind of never told. Like if you're trying to heal your pelvic floor after birth, but you've never learned how to properly engage those muscles, it's much harder to try to do that than locating them, learning how to feel them, move them, be in touch with them beforehand. And I'm so grateful that I did pelvic floor therapy for like a year. So from when I was like 20 weeks pregnant until this last spring. So that really, really helped me. And I feel set up for the next time I get pregnant, just knowing that I have some extra tools in my pocket to make sure that I'm engaging my pelvic floor, using it, practicing those muscles, because it really does make a difference in healing after birth. So make sure you guys check out last week's episode. And then next week, we are having on Taylor, who is a holistic sleep coach. I've been really looking forward to this episode. We had on a sleep trainer before. We've talked about sleep training, but there's so much information out there. And when it comes down to it, with anything, there's no one size fits all. And I feel torn with almost information overload, because it's like, well, the research says this, but then the research says that. And it's like, okay, what's the truth here, or what's going on? And that's where you really have to tune into your parenting intuition and figure out what's right for your family and figure out what's right for you. Is this working right now for our family? Is this not working? Do we need to change something? Because it's, like I said, there's no one size fits all. And thankfully, Jovi has started to sleep a little bit better. Last night was a little bit rough, but she's definitely sleeping better than she was for like 2 months. It was hell. I'm just going to be honest. It was hell. And there was some things we had to change because I'm like, this is no longer working. Like I cannot be up every hour and be on call at work and be a functioning adult in society. and she seems to be doing better. She's back to just kind of waking up 2 to 3 times, nursing, going right back to sleep, which I'm fine with that. So yeah, I feel like we're turning a corner, which is exciting. I feel a little bit more rested, which is amazing. And also, yeah, I think I said this before, but sleeping when the baby sleeps isn't just for the newborn stage. That is throughout your motherhood journey. Rest when the baby rests. Rest when your kids rest. I know you just want to get a bunch of stuff done when you can, and I feel that. Like, Jovi's napping right now, and I'm podcasting. I just made breakfast for myself. I already fed her, but I didn't have time to feed myself yet, and I have a couple things to do that I'm hoping to, like, catch a 30-minute nap if I can. And it's so easy to be like, okay, they're resting. I need to get these things done. But it's also important to teach your kids the value of resting, and that you rest and you take care of yourself, and that they see you when you're up, that you have stuff to do, that you're contributing to the household, that you're taking care of your family, and they learn those skills as well, to be a tiny human that learns how to help contribute to the household, to help be a member of the family. So I encourage you that if you are feeling guilty resting, don't, because it's health, it's science, like the way that your body heals and recovers and takes care of itself, the way that your hormones balance is through rest. So it is vitally important. And this season of life is so freaking hard to get that. It is so hard. And so I've learned that I have to just ask for more favors from people. Be like, hey, I'm going to sleep. You take Jovi. Or just resting when they rest. Set an earlier bedtime. Know that things can wait. One thing that has helped me is just trying to get things done right away too, not letting things pile up. Like if a dish is dirty, I just put it in the dishwasher right away. Not letting things pile up. So that later I have to do it. So working on it, trying to find this balance in motherhood. I don't know if I necessarily believe in balance. I think that there's seasons where things are harder, things are easier, and seasons where some things get more attention than others. I don't know if there's ever really a perfect balance or harmony, because life changes and your needs change. There might be a season where you have to prioritize your health a little bit more, or your relationship, or your children, whatever it is. But it doesn't mean that you completely forget about those other areas that need some TLC too. So we are just in this together. And even if you don't have kids, I had a really hard time finding balance, or learning how to really take care of my body and rest before that too. So you don't have to just have kids to have the reason to be like, I'm going to take a nap today. If you feel tired, let your body rest, let your body heal, and take that time for yourself. So, all right, we are going to dive into this episode with Dr. Dan, and I'm so excited for you to hear from him. All right, everyone, I have Dr. Dan here, and I'm super excited to talk with him. He's a psychologist, an author, a father, the co-founder of Parent Footprint, and he has a mission to make the world a more compassionate and loving place. And he's just awesome. I love the work that he is doing, and I'm so excited that he's taken the time to be here today. So thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
So I'd love for you to just kind of tell us a little bit about your work. You work with a wide variety of families in different areas, from gifted to special needs and everything in between. And how did you get into that?
So I was always drawn to children and adolescents when I was young, being a counselor at summer camps and playing tennis and being a tennis coach, tennis teacher. And so one of the things, I was always drawn to kids. I loved working with kids. And then when I was in school, I didn't really know what I wanted to be. And through a windy road, I found psychology. And then I learned there was this thing called being a psychologist, where you got to work with people. And I was someone that was always, I was always really involved with people and like naturally problem solving. I just, empathic, intuitive. I mean, I didn't realize that at the time, but looking back, like those were strengths. And so I found myself majoring in psychology and then going to graduate school because it's hard to do much with psychology unless you go on and have more training. And as I went through school, I really specialized in the children and the adolescents and families. And as I marched through it, you find that you kind of end up doing what your mentors and supervisors end up doing. So I spent a lot of years working with kids who had ADHD. And then I started to work with kids that have different behavioral difficulties, related and unrelated. And then anxiety, realizing that a lot of kids with behavior challenges, actually there was an underlying anxiety and worry that produced that behavior. And then moving on to dyslexia, which, oh, wow. So people actually can have reading issues who still actually can read. And then I fell into this thing called gifted and twice exceptionality, where understanding that these are also neurodiverse people that have these tremendous strengths, but also can, regardless, even if you have these tremendous intellectual academic strengths, you also can have that we call developmental asynchrony, or differences in what you're great at and what you're less developed at, which we also call twice exceptionality, where you have some gifted aspects and some processing challenges. So over time, I ended up working with, I would say, what we now call the neurodiverse gamut, and always felt like just seeing people's potential. I mean, that's something that I just like, seeing potential in things. I think I see potential in gardens and in houses and in design and in people. And I just feel very fortunate to be able to spend so far my career being able to work with people and support people, and then learn so much from them along the way.
All right. So by now, if you've been following me on Instagram, you know that I have been loving Stitch Fix. I do not like to shop. I never know what looks good on me. I end up wearing the same stuff every day, and I've been going through my closet, just getting rid of things that I feel frumpy in, which is the majority of my closet, and just wanting to replace it with items that I feel good in. I want to be able to walk into my closet, pick up anything, and put it on, which is why I've been loving Stitch Fix, because I don't have to go shopping. I have a personal stylist pick things out for me every single month and send it to me. I try it on, and what I like, I keep, and what I don't, I send back. And every single month, there's been a few items that I have kept. And what I love is it might not be something that I would necessarily pick out for myself, because like I said, I tend to gravitate toward very plain things, and I never know what fits my form or my figure. So I've been loving having things sent to me that I'm like, I don't know if I would have taken this off the shelf, but when I put it on, I'm like, oh, I love this. I feel really good in it. It's cute. It's like a t-shirt I can just throw on, and have an everyday outfit, which are the things I don't have. I'm tired of living in stretchy pants every day, all day. So I highly recommend Stitch Fix, because they make it so convenient for you to feel good. And you can set it up. You don't have to have a subscription. You pay $20 for the styling fee for each box, and then that credit goes toward pieces that you keep, and there's no hidden fees ever. Right now, you can get started today at stitchfix.com/mamas, and you'll get 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. That's stitchfix.com/mamas for 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. Go to stitchfix.com/mamas. Now, back to the episode. You can tell that you're really passionate about it by the way you talk, which is amazing, because I feel like everyone kind of strives to be able to do something with their life that they are passionate about, but not everyone finds that.
I feel really fortunate. I remember in college, I've told this story a few times, that I didn't realize that I didn't know that I was dyslexic, and so traditional learning was really hard for me. And then, there were things that were naturally intuitive and easy for me. And then there were the other things that seemed to be easy for everyone else that was hard for me. And I remember thinking when I was getting close to graduation, and people were like, what are you going to do? What are you going to be? And I remember thinking, gosh, I just want to have a job where I get paid to be myself. Like, that would be amazing. Mm-hmm. And, 30 years, almost 30 years later, I feel, I mean, there's more to it than that, but I just feel fortunate that I've learned to be who I am in the job, as opposed to as earlier in training. And I know, like in your training, like you're told to do certain things a certain way. And then through experience, you take what you've learned and then incorporate yourself into that. So I feel fortunate that I have a job where I get to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's a good way to put it. I feel like most places you have to like train a certain way, and then you can like adapt it to your own version. So you said earlier, like you've worked with, people who deal with anxiety and stuff. And that's kind of a topic that I'm very interested in. So I'm not an anxious person at all. Motherhood is
lucky.
definitely
very lucky.
I know motherhood's definitely brought things up for me, because I definitely had some like anxious postpartum thoughts the first few months. I've never been responsible for somebody else's life before. Like I lived a very carefree, do whatever I want life up until I had a kid. And then I'm like, holy crap, like this person is completely dependent on me, and my job is to protect them and meet their needs. And what if something happens, right? And so I had some of these obsessive thoughts the first few months, and thankfully those subsided. But I realized that like anxiety is this real thing, and my husband's family, like everyone in their family is so anxious. And my husband deals with some anxiety. His family does. And I've realized it's hard for me because like every time like we're talking about something, their response is, oh, well, what if blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that just wouldn't even enter my mind. Like, why does there have to be like a what if? Why does there have to be this other thing? And so when it comes with anxiety, it's like, how do we raise our daughter not being anxious? Is it like hereditary, or is there like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's everything. It's everything. Oh, the what ifs. We'll talk about the what ifs. Anxiety, depression, most things are heritable, right? So there is genetic loading, and then it's still the nature nurture debate. And, it's still pretty even depending on the research study. And that's the good news, right? Because there's a lot of nurture that goes into it, but people still come in with that nature. And so I do think there are things so I think one thing is that they've done studies about anxious temperaments and seeing that like people do have some pretty consistent temperaments throughout life. So first we have to see like, what do we have with this child? And some kids come into the world so easygoing, and other kids come into the world much more feeling like insecure and anxious. And again, and it also can change. Some kids are really easygoing, and then the school years hit, and then there are a lot of anxiety comes into the fore, whether it's sensory overwhelm, or there's learning issues, or there's some social pressures happening. So just to know, like, anything is possible. It's really anything can happen. From a parenting perspective, we do really need to be aware. And it comes down to like these little subtle messages that we give our kids. And it goes down to, a child falls. They're learning to walk. So let's say they're 1.5 or 2, between 1 and 2. They fall. They look at you. And then either you could smile and say, oopsie, you can get up. Good job. And then they smile and they dust themselves off. Or they look at you and you're like, oh my God, honey, are you okay? Come here. Let me see your knee today. And then all of a sudden they're crying and they're freaking out. It's like, it's those little behaviors do really inform over time. We do live in a world, I'm now getting old, with older kids, like we do live in a world which thought to be, it's a little more sketchy than when we grew up in a lot of places. So there's these parenting messages, like we need to give our kids reality about the world, and hey, you need to look out for this, and you should always be with someone. And, especially if you're a female, don't go into these places by yourself. Unfortunately, these are realities. And it's like, how do we do that without instilling fear or too much fear to have an anxious child who's afraid of everything? So like, these are all like things to think about.
Right. And so I'm like, yeah, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, that wasn't enough. Okay. I actually have to work here. So I would say one important question for a parent to ask themselves is this my worry, or is this a reality of the situation? And that's sometimes hard because people who are anxious feel their anxious thoughts are reality, right? Like, what if this happens? Well, this could happen. It's like, okay, so what are the chances that this could happen? And how do we mitigate this? And is it okay for me to allow my kid to do this? Or can I give them a little more rope? Can I give them a little more independence? And can I manage my fear versus pretend it is an objective fear? And so I guess what I'm saying, it's still sometimes hard to tease. I think that's perhaps going to be easier for you than your husband if he's more primed to worry. And I think that's when, if you have two parents or partners or a community, extended family members raising kids, these are worth conversations as opposed just to, nope, you're not going, that's dangerous, or that's scary. Do you know what happens out there? Those sorts of things. So I feel like the answer is not always yes or no. It's the process. And that makes me think of the great book, The Road Less Traveled. You heard it's an older book, The Road Less Traveled. And what Scott Peck said in the parenting chapter, and I read this long before I had kids, but it stuck with me. And he said, it's not whether you say yes or no to your kids, it's whether they know you care enough about their question to think about an answer. And so to me, like, a lot of it is the process as opposed to just the final decision about what's okay and what's not okay.
No, that makes really good sense. I will say, like, with my husband, one thing that I love about him too is that you would never know that he's anxious. Like, he'll sometimes give me insights into his thoughts and I'm like, this is how you think? He's like, all the time. And I'm like, what? Yeah. Like, he doesn't project it. Like, I never feel his anxiousness, or he doesn't seem like anxious in our relationship. And even with Jovi, like, he's very like, oh, she'll learn. She can do it on her own. She'll figure it out. Which is great. But
that's really healthy.
Yeah. There's like a family dynamic of anxiousness though, that's like very hard sometimes. So I think that that's really good information. And you've written some books about it as well.
Yes. So, a few books came out of my experience, and the funny story of how the books came to be, I started giving talks, and after the talks, people would say, oh, where can we get your book? And I'm like, well, I don't have a book, and I hate to write, and I'm dyslexic. I don't really like any of this stuff. I like to talk. I'm better at that. And over time, the way I got convinced is I got referred to a colleague's publisher who said, hey, Dan, you have these DVDs of this talk. Just transcribe it and then fill in the rest. And you have so much of your stuff there. I'm like, oh, that is awesome. So I got someone to transcribe it. And it came back like 12 pages long. I'm like, what? So I ended up having to talk through my book. And so the books are called, there's a parent version, a kid adolescent version, and a young kid version. It's Make Your Worrier a Warrior is the parent version. And then there's From Worrier to Warrior, which is more of a like older elementary school teenager. And then there's a warrior workbook for younger kids. And it's all based on all of the strategies that I've learned and used through my work. And then also what I ended up using with my own kids, and then in my own life as what I say is I didn't know that I was a worrier. I just thought that's the way everyone thought. And I didn't know what perfectionism was. And I thought that's the way everyone thought. So I tell people I'm a perfectionist in recovery. Yeah. And there are lots of tools that people can use. I mean, the other reason I wrote them is I felt like parents can do so much for their kids. I mean, there's a place for counseling and psychotherapy when we need them. And I feel like that's when it's like people say, how do you know when you need a therapist? And usually it's like, well, when your family and friends are no longer enough to help your level of distress or the challenges get too big, that's when you seek professional help. So the books are really about very user-friendly mindfulness, cognitive, and behavioral strategies, and an understanding and education of how our brain and body work with the fight and flight, so we can start to get to know what our anxious response is, why it's there, and what to do about it. Yeah, that's so interesting. We're going to take a quick break from this episode to talk about one of my favorite partnerships, and that's with BetterHelp. You know that I'm a big advocate of taking control of your mental health, and BetterHelp makes it affordable, convenient, and comfortable for you to do it. You can choose a setting in which
you feel comfortable talking to somebody in. So whether you are dealing with just huge life changes, season changes, depression, stress, anxiety, relationships, motherhood, identity, they have somebody on there that you can talk to. Everything you share is always confidential. And in fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they are recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. And you can start living your happiest life today when you go to betterhelp.com/mamas. And as a listener, you will get 10% off your first month. Join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mamas. I guess there is some anxiety in my family. My dad and my sister both struggle with it. And that's like where I feel like my sister and I, there was like, she's like my best friend, but I just could not understand her thought process. I'm like, I don't get it. Just let it go. Like, like I don't.
Oh, it's such a blessing. Like for people who can think like that, it is such a blessing. And it's so interesting to me how people can't understand other people's thinking. Like I've literally had a couple on the couch, and one had intense fear of bridges, driving over bridges, and the other one had intense social anxiety. And neither of them had any empathy or understanding for the other person's fear because they didn't understand it. So some person's like, I can't go over a bridge. And they're like, the one who can't go to a party is saying like, what is wrong with you? I can't believe you can't drive over a bridge. And that person's like, well, you can't walk into a party and talk to anyone, right? It's like, It's so hard to understand someone else's experience.
Right. But you just have to understand everyone has something.
For sure.
Yeah. And I feel like anxiety is just like something that you hear so much about now. So, and now that I'm in that parenting world, you hear about kids who have anxiety. So like when would be a time where a parent would be like, maybe this is actual like anxiety and maybe they need to see someone, or is there like some sort of treatment?
Yeah. So when we think about what are the different type of symptoms or that we see when we're looking at anxiety, so there's the physical symptoms. There's stomach aches, there's headaches, there's nail biting, there's frequent urination, having to go to the bathroom. There's nightmares, difficulty sleeping. And then there's all the behavior ones like as like in our family, we call the Velcro child. Like the child does not want to leave you. There's a lot of crying. There's a lot of need for reassurance. There is a lot of separation, trouble going into a classroom, trouble going into a party. There's lots of different forms that the anxiety can take. And, people say like, how do you know it's a problem? And I say this really simple, silly thing, which is a problem's not a problem unless it's a problem. And what that really means is it's like when it becomes a problem, like it's really impacting a child's life, your family's life, their daily activities, their sleep, their eating, stomach aches with that lack of not having an appetite, then it's good to at least go to your pediatrician. Early on, at least go to your pediatrician and start there, because sometimes there can be some medical issues that can be ruled out. And then there's always child therapists. And when the kids are young, play therapy can be really helpful. You're not going to do as much of the talking, the cognitive, the thinking therapy, or the behavioral therapy as much at the beginning. You might just be doing some play therapy. But anxiety is the number one mental health issue. And that was before the pandemic. And it's only skyrocketed for people of all ages. Kids and teenagers are really been suffering with the removal from socialization in life and fear of bad things happening. So it's great to get a consultation if you've used all your tools. I always say we want to model this health for kids. Like we never hesitate to go to an accountant or get an attorney or a landscape person, like when we need help at something that's outside of our expertise, and going to a mental health professional to get a consult can be really helpful and give some peace of mind of okay, here are my options of how to support my child.
Yeah. So you have your private practice. Which I have a question. Do you do virtual support now, especially since pandemic stuff?
Yeah, we do. We do. So the pandemic really, I mean, it had been around, of course. Virtual counseling had been around for a while, especially for rural areas. And then now it's everywhere, as well as we do a lot of testing for kids for learning issues and different developmental profiles. And so now we can do that virtually as well. So the silver lining of the pandemic is we're able to access more people and provide that, no more commuting or getting on planes to get the help. Yeah.
And I feel like somebody with anxiety too, sometimes the last thing you want to go do is sit in somebody's office and wait to be called back, I've been to counseling before, and I've been like in a waiting room with other people, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I wonder if they're all like, what is she here for?
Okay, so, as a psychologist who does it for a living, when I've been on the other side as well, I was thinking the exact same thing. I'm in a waiting room with everyone else thinking like, what are they here for? What are they wondering what I'm here for? It's just human.
Right. I know. It's definitely, there's like a little bit of nerve-wrackingness, if that's a word to it. Yeah. So you have your practice, and then you also are the host of The Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan, which is an amazing podcast with parenting experts. You guys talk about purpose, raising happy kids, and modeling ways to live your best life. I'd love for you to tell us more about your podcast and the community that you've built with it.
Sure. So Parent Footprint is a company I co-founded with my business partner, Payman Fazli. And the purpose of the Parent Footprint organization was to create Parent Footprint awareness training. And the awareness training is an online interactive training where it's videos that take you through from where you are to where you want to be, with the goal of raising healthy kids while figuring out where you came from, what you bring to the table, and all of the different elements to be very purposeful in how you're going to raise your kids. And the idea is, what footprint do you want to leave? Like, what is the parental footprint so we could choose the footprint? So we have that online Parent Footprint awareness training. And what's fun about that training is it's there's a video for me, and then I ask a question, and depending on what response you pick, you get a different individualized video. So what we did is try to individualize the experience. This is, of course, years before the pandemic, where you can sit in the comfort anywhere in your car, in your bathroom, on your phone, and go through these in a very supportive, safe place. The podcast came out of that. And so the podcast was another way to bring forth this idea, this mission, this really passion and goal to help people be the best people they can be in order to raise healthy kids. And so the podcast, as you know, is so fun that you get to talk with all of these awesome people with all of these different experiences. And so we're going on this September will be 5 years of a whole host of experts and so many people share their wisdom and their books and their experiences. And with that whole notion of, we need to be personally aware of who we are, where we came from, and what we bring into every parenting situation, so we can be purposeful about how we raise our kids in line with whatever your personal family goal and family values are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you've had so many experts on there. Do you feel like you still learn from all these different people?
All the time. And learn from, I think, two facets. One is whatever experience they bring to the show, whatever their angle is, medical, consultative, psychological, academic, whatever, spiritual. But then also from the individual person who has their own life journey that they share. Mm-hmm. So really, it's this wonderful combination of the content with the person and their own experience and wisdom that they bring. Yeah.
But I mean, that is the awesome thing with podcasting. I feel like you just get to connect with so many different people, and always learn and grow and hear their experiences. So speaking of experiences, did you become a psychologist before you had kids?
I did.
Okay. Do you feel like that played a huge role in how you parented?
So, I think the answer is yes. It's yes to a degree. That's actually a hard one because I did learn a lot about child development and about, the do's and don'ts and positive development and different developmental trajectories. So it clearly informed and informs my parenting. And I guess my is we still end up just falling back on like who we are and what our own experiences were. And it's just fascinating to be a person, like watching myself at times as the therapist in the room who would tell other parents things. And then I almost like have this third eye watching myself interact in a situation and say like, are you kidding me? Like, what would you be saying to yourself if you were your client right now? Like, so I just wanted like the humanness of just reacting on a combination of your personality and your own experiences really comes through often in the moment. But what's behind it is all the information and the training and what I've learned from my own clients. So I want to say it's not only becoming a psychologist, but learning from clients, like what they did right, what they could have done differently, like trying to bring all of those experiences into parenting situations when we're mindful, which of course we are not always mindful.
Definitely not. So do you work more you kind of work with families as a whole, right? You see people of all ages.
Yes, people of all ages, for sure. And these days, so we have a center with amazing practitioners. So over time, I've gone from like full-time client load to half-time client load because of doing other stuff with the organization and the podcast and such. But still, really seeing the gamut. I would say personally, I spent a lot of time working like on the ground with kids for a long time. I'm seeing less kids and more teenagers and young adults and adults these days. And I think that's just kind of happened as I've gotten older. But I just love young minds that are just really searching. And particularly in this day and age that we're living in, with there's so much adversity, but also so many possibilities as well to be who you want to be and create what you want to create for your life.
Yeah. And I feel like, I mean, being a mindful parent, you can help foster that in children, which can be hard. I feel like, so there's tons of information out there, right, on like mindful parenting and what that actually means. I feel like the thing that comes up for me is like, how do you teach your kids to be able to like trust you as a parent and be able to like listen to you, but also have their own creative spirits?
That's a great question. And so our three kids are between 17 and 21 now. So we've hit a lot of the phases and had to experience what you're saying. I would say, so early on, it's really about that bond and that trusting bond. And it goes back to just attachment theory of like, are you there to consistently meet your child's biological needs and consistently be there to soothe them? That's all the brain-based parenting talks about, is how to help your child soothe, to co-regulate with them. So those early years are really important. And then we need to remember that when we get to the 2s and the 3s and then several developmental phases, through adolescence, like their job is not just to comply. Their job is to like understand how the world works by pushing back with the most hopefully safe and trusting people in their lives and practice on us. And so it's this fine line of you're trying to help your child learn where the limits are, what's okay, what's not okay, what's okay to say, what's okay to do, how to behave, while at the same time trying to honor their individual freedom. And I just think back when our oldest, when she wanted to dress herself every morning, and the way her dress was just like in these wonderful colors with, I always called it Pippi Longstocking for people who remember Pippi Longstocking, just loved it. Like, and you have a choice there. those don't really go together, or you might want to wear this, or it's like, oh, sweetheart, you look so colorful today. It's like it starts with those little things, and then it gets, more real with, hey, we want to go out all night, or we want to go here with these people, we want to have people over, and all the stuff that I'll spare you right now not to have to think about. But it's constantly, again, I think the mindfulness is being aware of what's an appropriate developmental push, and how should I respond back in a way that I'm teaching them about the world, which is my job as a parent, but also allowing them to be who they are while we're still figuring that out. Because as you're learning with Jovi, like, you still, like, she's becoming every day. Like, it's like they keep growing, and who they are at 1 and 5 and 7 and 15 and 21, like, same person, but so different when you look through the movies and the photo album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's definitely becoming every day. It's like, I feel like the age that she's at is just so cool, because she's learning everything. Like, yeah, she's 10 months. And the other day she was like standing up against the couch, like leaning on it. And I was like, how big is Jovi? And she puts her hands up and goes, so big. And she's just standing there. And then she realizes she's standing. She's like, and just like sits down. Like, wait, can I do this? I don't know if I can do this. And just like new words are coming out of her mouth, different babbling. And she's just so much fun. And I feel like one of the hard things during this stage, though, again, is that over information load of like, Jovi definitely does not sleep through the night. Her sleeping's been awful for like the last month, and has teeth coming in. She's learning how to, it's all these developments. And a lot of people have told me, they're like, well, you just need to let her cry. Like, and I can't do that. Like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
But then it's also, then you like almost get judged for like being a bad parent because your kid's not sleeping. And it's just like all these things on different sides. And it goes back to what we talked about on your podcast, just kind of like tuning everything out and then like going with that gut. So that's like where I feel like
trusting yourself.
Right. Where I get the information overload. Cause I'm like, yeah, I haven't slept in like a month, but I know that this will pass. It's just a season.
Yeah.
And they can start having nightmares at this age and stuff like that. So I'm like, I don't know if she had a nightmare. I don't know if her teeth hurt. I don't know if she's just hungry, but I'm going to go to her.
Yeah. And I think you have to trust. I encourage you to trust your instincts. And I think of the famous beloved pediatrician, Terry Brazelton, who talked about touch points. And with every touch point into every developmental phase, there's dysregulation, right? There's this a lot of behavior, and it's usually the sign that there's another developmental phase coming. And our kids didn't sleep. I mean, my wife and I were sleep deprived. We felt, I think, till like for the first 9 years of our parenting life, there was 1 to 2 to all of them who were up because of different sleep dysregulation issues. So I totally empathize. Like that does take its toll. And there are programs that are out there, and some people swear by the sleep training, and our experience was, you know what, that didn't work. And we wish we didn't try it for our particular kids, because it actually at times made things even harder. Mm-hmm. So it's like, and there's sleep consultants out there, and there's lots of different approaches, but phases are phases. When is something not a phase? It's kind of like a recession. You have to look back and go like, oh, this has been happening a whole long time. At some point, if things are just not resolving, then yeah, like maybe you try, you reach out to a consultant and say, is there something I'm missing? But, you're a month into it. She's teething. These are developmental spurts. You got to do what you think is right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely hard.
Yeah.
But like I said, I know that it'll pass. So one thing I want to touch on is parenting can be really hard, and it usually brings up a lot in us if we are aware of it. So how do you feel like even when you were parenting that you had to learn how to reparent yourself, and how would you tell people maybe who are listening who get triggered a lot by their kids? Like maybe that's a sign of something else in their life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I feel like, so our kids are often our greatest teachers, and they're teaching us about themselves, but they're also teaching us about ourselves. And a lot of things make sense if we can take the time to step back and think about them. And I think in our busy world and our just reactive, we're often reactive and in real time, we're not always taking the step back to say, so when my child does this, it reminds me of what I used to do. And then I used to get into a lot of trouble or actually get hurt or mistreated when I did that. And so I don't like when they do that because I don't want that to happen to them. Or I want to make sure that they don't act like I acted. You know, like there's all these dynamics. And again, a lot of times I'm answering a few questions. So one is like, there are certain things that triggered me, and did I have to think them through? Absolutely. So my own worries, you know, I was probably more like how you describe your husband. Like I was probably a quiet worrier. I'm thinking about all of these things, and my wife's always helpful to like, how about no what if there? Like, why don't we just focus on what's going on right now? And then my own increased awareness of perfectionism, which I didn't learn really about, even someone I'm supposed to know what I'm doing, is like in myself, how the perfectionism played on me, and then how that would come out in things that I didn't even realize that I might expected from my kids. And I'm not just talking like schoolwork, but just in sort of like behavior, like a high level of like, I would expect my child to act like this, and realizing like, okay, these are my expectations. And how was it based on how I thought I was expected to act, or expectations that were real or not real for me, but what I felt. And so I feel like the most important thing we can do is reflect on what we have been through and what are the things that we liked, what are the things that we didn't like, and then ask ourselves why we're being triggered by certain behaviors, so we can try to uncover, again, this whole ideal of awareness, try to uncover what the patterns are and separate our own stuff from our child's real development, because I think they all get mushed together most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think they do too. And I feel like, although I haven't been parenting yet, I see that. Like, I see the triggers that might come up, and knowing that it has nothing to do with Jovi. She's a 10-month-old, like, you know, like, right. She's not talking back. She's not doing anything. She's not disobeying.
She's trying to ruin your nights. She's trying, right? Yeah.
She's like, screw you, Mom.
Yeah.
No, which I think since I've gotten that awareness, it hasn't bothered me as much. I remember like in the beginning, that initial sleep deprivation was really hard and very triggering. And then now I just get really tired. I don't really feel it coming up, but realizing like that is something in my own life. Like there's some sort of deep rooted anger here that I need to go back to therapy and talk to somebody about, because I don't know where it comes from, but I'm at least like able in the moment to recognize that this is my anger and it's not even with her. It's like, even my husband and I got into a fight like a month ago about something. And I was like, I'm so angry and I don't know why, because it wasn't about the fight at all.
Yeah.
It wasn't even like a big fight. I don't even remember what it was about. Like, you know, like I have no idea. But I was so angry, and I was just telling him, I'm like, I have some real anger issues. Yeah. And I want to work through that before our kids are older, because I don't want it to like come out in them. Not to say that I'm going to never get angry at them, because I'm sure I will a lot. But just recognizing that that's there, and that that's not my kids, you know, or my future kids, or whatever it is, that's like my issue that I'm going to need to work on. But I could see how triggering it is when you're exhausted, when you've said the same thing over and over and over, when your kid just throws all their food on the floor and you just cleaned it, you know, like there's all these things that can happen where you're like, but, but I feel like just kind of having that, okay, is this me? Because it usually is. Yeah,
I mean, I'm just having flashbacks of the like, whether it's the the goldfish or the Cheerios or whatever, just the bowl on the, just being thrown on the floor and you pick it back up and then they throw it back on. It's like they're communicating, right? Like they're communicating to us and it's so frustrating, but it's like, what they might be playing a game, right? Like that's like a game and we've had a stressful day and we're tired, and how we react repeatedly, informs how they experience us and how they experience the world, and when they think they're okay and when they're not okay, and when they're good and when they're bad. And it's not to put all this pressure on us, because I'm saying, like, I certainly have made my share of mistakes and was not as mindful as I wanted to be, particularly when our kids were younger and I was working a lot and traveling. And but all we can do is learn from every experience, right? And try to be like, okay, what do I need to do to be less stressed out? Because a lot of it is our frame of mind and our frame of reference, even before we have the opportunity to get triggered, is how do we walk into a room tired, stressed, agitated, and then trying to practice our own self-care, which I know is hard especially with young kids, and during a pandemic when parents and kids are all kind of locked up together. But these things are so critical. So we have a presence about ourselves to try to sift through this stuff rather than just react.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like it's so hard though.
It is. No, it is. It's really hard.
But that's also something that I've been trying to work on. My husband said it the other day, because I've been saying that a lot about a lot of things. I'm like, this is so hard. And he's like, stop saying that, because he's like, you're making it harder by saying that it's hard, like constantly. Yeah. It is what it is.
It is what it is. It just is. And what you're making me think about is years ago, a few years into the podcast, I did this podcast with this fellow who wrote the book. He's a therapist on the East Coast, wrote The Possibility Principle. And it's based on, he combined quantum theory, quantum physics with his therapy. And the point he kept making on the show, which really stuck with me, is like, in every moment is a new possibility. Every single moment. And the trick is to take every moment as a new moment, instead of being in the past or being in the present or saying, yeah, I know how this is going to go. Like, even when we say, like, this is hard, we already know the script. We're already saying we know the script, as opposed to trying to have that sort of, whether it's the Buddha mind, the child mind, like, be in every moment anew. That creates the most possibility and the most presence. And yes, I will say, that is hard to do. I think it's so aspirational to try to experience each moment with endless possibilities, regardless of what the past ones were. Yeah,
that's good. So this is kind of a fun, random question. You have a lot of trinkets on your wall behind you.
Oh, yeah.
Did you travel a lot, or what are those from?
So partially from travel, and partially from collecting, and partially from then people giving me masks because they know I liked masks, just to represent different cultures and design. And then you also see some old self-portraits of my kids when they were young from years ago. And then lots of fun little statues like Buddha and Yoda and, all the great guides like Yoda. And then some Legos, because I also like Legos.
Very cool. So for everybody listening, where can they find your podcast, and when do your new episodes come out, and where can they connect with you at?
So the podcasts drop every Thursday morning, and you can find them anywhere you like to find your podcasts. We are going to be starting soon, and maybe by the time this airs, a Stitcher Premium episode, which will be one Tuesday a month, which is going to be, quote, sitting down with Dr. Dan, where I interact with our producer and our audio engineer, and we answer listener questions. So please send in questions. And you can follow us Instagram and Facebook at Parent Footprint Podcast, and Twitter at Dr. Dan Peters. And also there's a website, drdanpeters.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode. again, go listen to his podcast, The Parenting Footprint with Dr. Dan, because there's so much valuable information in those episodes. I've already listened to episodes and ordered books. I have like the biggest Amazon wish list full of basically parenting books and a few other things on there because I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta listen to this one. I listened to one of his episodes, the 12 things that mentally strong parents don't do. And I have the book in my cart. The author who wrote it, it was a great episode. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to listen to this episode. And they talk about helicopter parenting, and some other really great stuff. So it's really good stuff. Make sure you check it out. I'm going to be checking it out with you. Really valuable information. All right. Make sure you guys are following along. The Instagram, the Facebook group, connecting. Let me know what topics you want to hear. Let me know who you want to hear from. And we will try our best to make that happen. All right. Love you guys. Have a great week.
If you want to be the most interesting person at the cocktail party, well, hop on over and listen to the Brain Candy podcast.
Our award-winning content will have you laughing while you're learning.
We read all the best articles, books, and studies and keep up with new TV shows, documentaries, and pop culture. And then we cram it all into 2 shows a week.
Conspiracy theories, cannibal rabbits, unsolved mysteries, the history of the Walkman. There's something for everyone.
The Brain Candy podcast. Find our link in the show notes.
Or simply search for the Brain Candy podcast on your podcast app.